In the first chapter of Kagurabachi, we see the main character, Chihiro, um, who is the son of a legendary swordsmith, basically unfold as a character. His main motivations was to be able to follow in his father's footsteps and create swords as good, or if not better, than his dad. But he had no real understanding of the real world and anything outside of it, outside of his little bubble that his father created. Um, Within this chapter, we see his major motivations, um, because his dad, right before the time skip, instilled this value of understanding the weight that a samurai sword carries and your duty as a swordsmith to understand the gravity of the things that you're putting out into the world. Because a samurai sword, well, katana, is used as a tool for killing. These aren't toys. So he was trying to reiterate that this is a weight that you have to have on your shoulders. After the time skip, we see that Chihiro has a scar over his face. Clearly something traumatic has happened, and he reiterates that he doesn't want to forget that trauma. So even though he can get the scar removed or somewhat covered up, he continues to see it, so his hatred can refresh every single day. At this point in the story, I have no clue why he has this scar. This is my first time reading the manga, but it's definitely interesting. I planned on reading Kagurabachi a long time ago, right around when it first came out, and it ended up being on Manga Pill. But I'm always iffy about reading fresh new mangas, because if I really like it, then I have to wait week to week. But if I don't like it, it's like, I just wasted my time. Chapter 2 gives us good insight on why Chihiro is the way that he is. His father was murdered right in front of him by 3 sorcerers, I believe, all for the means to take the enchanted swords that he ended up recovering after the war. He saw that the enchanted swords were used situationally, and for that era, they were no longer necessary. So he wanted to make sure he retrieved them and they were in a safe space. We see that Chihiro is now trying to retrieve them. We learned that all of this happened 3 years ago, when Chihiro was 15. He's now 18, and having only 3 years of combat experience, he's a little rough around the edges, but he shows a lot of promise, and he's definitely working himself into the ground because his major motivation is revenge. He's trying to make sure that the enchanted blades are brought back to a safe space and they aren't used for killing, because that's not what his father wanted. We can see that he clearly loved his father in a very deep and honest and loving way, and his rage is genuine, and I'm very interested to see how the next chapter unfolds. Chapter 3, they're following up on a lead in Tokyo. Apparently there's been a sighting of the use of an enchanted blade, and they want to investigate it. I want to reiterate, Chihiro has been around the enchanted blades. He knows them much better than the average person, considering his father created them. But the witness is a child. He doesn't believe her. There's a lot of doubt shrouded in her claims because she's a child, and also a lot of the language she uses is really hard to understand. But eventually they have a conversation with her. She seems more and more genuine, but they're not quite convinced. They really just want to send her off into an orphanage. She talks about how there's someone chasing after her. So eventually Chihiro's just like, whatever, let's go get some food. They go out to eat, she gets some tempura, and they're having a conversation. Eventually, there's this guy behind them having a conversation with the waiter, and he's getting increasingly more and more angry. He eventually puts these spikes into the waiter's neck, and then he goes after the witness. Chihiro instantly realizes, oh, she wasn't lying. So all the stuff about the sword and the bodyguard has to be true. So then it cuts to them fighting, and the chapter ends. So now we're moving on to chapter 4. Okay, chapter 4 starts off with the fight between Chihiro and the random sorcerer. But I want to point out that there's another person with Chihiro. His name is Shiba, and he's essentially his protector and instructor and his guide of sorts. He was there when Shiba's dad died. He nursed him back to health and is there with him on this path of vengeance. Couldn't figure out his name before, so didn't reiterate it or explain it in the previous chapters because I literally couldn't remember his name, but they explicitly said it, so now I know it. Okay, moving on. The chapter is essentially the entire fight scene. Shiba brings the witness to safety, and Chihiro fights off the sorcerer. The sorcerer has this power to instill like these explosives into these almost nesting dolls, which I believe is his power. Which the explosions are really powerful. He goes to talk about how I didn't know there was another enchanted blade, which sparks Chihiro to realize that he knows some information. So he immediately tries to question him, and the sorcerer is bragging about how the enchanted blades aren't as strong as he thought and whatnot. Eventually, we see the capabilities of Chihiro's blade. It can work defensively, it can work offensively, it can block projectiles. It's really versatile. And once he defeats him, the chapter ends as he's starting to question him. He asks him 3 things. And we're moving on to chapter 5. In chapter 5, it's a little slowing of the pace. We learn a little bit more about the witness and all that she's gone through. Apparently, she was caged up for a long time and really didn't have access to food. So Chihiro is actually taking her to get food and having her experience all these things. And he realizes that she really is just like this bossy kid who's gone through a lot of stuff and hasn't really been given enough love to be happy. So she goes on to reiterate that this is a time that she's been happy when she hasn't been before. Shiba is gathering information from the sorcerer that they captured, the same one that Chihiro fought and defeated, and eventually leading to the end of the chapter, they get information out of him, and they know who their next target is. Some weapons dealer who has an enchanted blade. Chihiro is obviously really interested in that, and the chapter ends with him saying he's going to be right there as he's driving back to Shiba. And I think this is where I'll cut it off. Thanks for listening to me talk about Kagurabachi, one of the few mangas that I haven't really sat down and read. I'll try to make this a pretty consistent thing where I read mangas because my interests are pretty broad. So Thanks for watching.